Well, this story is a delight for me. I want to bring in Aaron Parnas, our legal analyst, to break it down. So give us the context of this story and then Trump's lawyers being reprimanded in a beautiful fashion.
Yeah, so to give you some background first, this is coming from the New York Attorney General civil fraud trial in New York, where Judge Engoron, the judge presiding over the case, is expected to issue a decision any day now, or really any week now. And after closing arguments had concluded in December, Judge Engoron had been writing his decision. But in the past couple weeks, a little wrinkle came up that has caused some trouble for Trump's attorneys. And that little wrinkle is a New York Times article that Alan Weisselberg, Trump's former CFO, allegedly is in talks with New York District Attorney to potentially plead guilty to perjury for lying on the witness stand during the civil fraud trial. Now, after that New York Times article came out, Judge Engoron emailed attorneys for both the Attorney General, but also for Trump and the Trump org, and essentially asked how that New York Times article, assuming it is right, impacts his ultimate decision. And he said that the attorneys need to respond because based on this New York Times article, he could just simply say anything that Weisselberg testified to on the witness stand was false and was untrue because of the potential perjury plea. So that's the background. After Trump's attorneys responded, specifically Alina Abba, who represents Weisselberg, and then Clifford Robert, who represents the Trump organization, both of them in their response essentially said, "Hey, Judge, you are too political. This is just another one of your games. You should stop this." And Judge Engoron has quickly fired back in a letter to them or in an email to them saying, "How dare you, essentially? It is not a political inquiry. It is a legitimate inquiry. Because if Weisselberg lied on the witness stand, then that ultimately does impact the decision Judge Engoron makes." So that's where we're at right now. The judge is essentially firing back at both Abba and Clifford Robert, who's the attorney for the Trump organization.
And I want to read some excerpts from the email you're referencing from the judge to Trump's lawyers. Judge Engoron, writes, "When I sent my straightforward narrow request for information about possible perjury by Alan Weisselberg in the subject case, I was not seeking to initiate a wide-ranging debate with counsel. However, your misleading response grossly mischaracterizes the letter that I wrote, and I feel compelled to respond. Arguing against judicial notice is attacking a straw person, as I have not taken, do not plan to take, and did not suggest or hint that I would take judicial notice of the subject New York Times article or the contents thereof." It goes on to say he's not going to take this New York Times article as evidence. It'll be Weisselberg's testimony or guilty plea. Then I'll skip forward to this moment. He writes, "You and your co-counsel have been questioning my impartiality since the early days of this case, presumably because I sometimes rule against your clients. The whole approach is getting old." So Aaron, what's your response to what I just read there?
Yeah, I mean, it's just simply indicative of Donald Trump once again pushing this idea that Judge Engoron is somehow politically motivated. He had been doing this entire trial. Him and his attorneys have repeatedly first suggesting that that Judge Engoron's law clerk was somehow politically motivated against Trump. Then they had a gag order issued. Then Trump in the courtroom repeatedly said that the case was politically motivated, railed against Letitia James, blamed Judge Engoron again. And this is just another example. And Judge Engoron is rightfully calling them out for this. Now, it's interesting. Alina Abba is Weisselberg's attorney in this case. And in the first letter Judge Engoron, or the first email Judge Engoron sent to Abba and the other attorneys, he said that under New York rules of professional conduct, an attorney is required to disclose when their client may have committed perjury on the witness stand. And that because Abba is essentially Weisselberg's attorney, if he lied on the witness stand, she should disclose it. And she, in her response letter, said she doesn't have to disclose it, or she doesn't want to disclose it. She doesn't know anything about it, essentially. But it's an interesting situation they have going on there right now.
Yeah, and everything plays into the narrative that Trump pushes. So he can act out, have these outbursts, do things that would get other defendants admonished, and what he's doing is saying this is so politicized, so they're going to treat me so poorly. And again, do things that would get other people treated way worse than he's being treated by the court, by the judge. And then finally he pushes a judge to doing something to punish him. And then he can point to that as, see, I'm the victim. They're treating me so poorly. They're gagging me. Well, they wouldn't have to if you weren't going after, like you said, the clerk of the judge or whoever it might be, and all these outrageous statements on his social media platforms. So this perjury from Weisselberg, how consequential is that for Trump?
It's interesting. So the New York Attorney General's office actually has argued that it doesn't matter whether Judge Engoron considers a possible perjury charge for Weisselberg, because his testimony was already so misleading and so misrepresentative of the facts of the case that it was already a nullity. It was already false. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really impact the ultimate decision. And I think that generally tracks what's going to happen here. I mean, regardless of whether Weisselberg is charged with perjury or not, the New York Attorney General's office did a good job kind of laying out how the facts differ from Weisselberg's testimony. And remember, this case isn't just against Trump. It's also against Weisselberg, who is a co-defendant in the case, or may have been in the past. So this has big implications because Weisselberg was Trump's main financial guy. He was the CFO of the Trump org. So it will ultimately play a big role in how much Trump owes to the state.
Aaron, where can people find you?
On all my social media platforms at Aaron Parnas.